In 1987, Louisville, Kentucky, boxing legend Muhammad Ali notices a homeless man being harassed outside his gym. Against everyone's advice, Ali begins training him, seeing potential where others see only a lost cause. As their unlikely relationship develops, the homeless man, James "Shadow" Wilson, gradually transforms, not just physically, but mentally. The story reveals how Ali's compassion and belief in second chances leads to an extraordinary journey of redemption, culminating in a surprising revelation 5 years later that changes both their lives forever. The bitter January wind howled through the streets of Louisville, cutting through layers of clothing like they were nothing more than tissue paper. Muhammad Ali pulled his coat tighter around his neck as he approached his gym, the same building where he'd first learned to box as a 12-year-old boy named Cassius Clay. Despite his battle with Parkinson's, which had been diagnosed just 3 years prior, Ali maintained his routine visits to the gym, finding strength in the familiar sounds and smells of his boxing home. As he neared the entrance, he noticed a commotion. A small crowd had gathered around a tall, skinny, homeless man who was defending himself against the taunts and shoves of 3 teenagers. The man's clothes were tattered, his beard unkempt, but there was something in his stance, a natural athletic posture that caught Ali's trained eye. "Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee," the homeless man muttered, throwing weak shadow punches at his tormentors. He was using Ali's famous words, though his execution was clumsy and uncoordinated. "Hey!" Ali called out, his voice still commanding despite the disease that had begun to soften it. The teenagers froze, recognizing the legendary figure approaching them. "Is that how your mamas raised you, to gang up on a man who's down on his luck? Before I continue, I need to ask you something. This channel only exists because of you. You are important to me, and I know you value stories told with soul. If you feel something genuine just from this beginning, subscribe now. Seriously, it costs you nothing, but means everything to me who creates each story with love." The boys scattered like leaves in the wind, embarrassed to be caught by the greatest. The homeless man looked up, his eyes widening in recognition. "Muhammad Ali," he whispered, his voice hoarse from disuse. "The champ himself." Ali smiled, extending his hand. "And you are?" James Wilson." The man hesitated before taking Ali's hand. "But folks on the street call me Shadow, 'cause I'm usually just a shadow no one notices." Ali studied the man. He was perhaps 40 years old, though it was hard to tell, with the weathered face and premature gray streaking through his dark hair. But beneath the dirt and desperation, Ali saw something familiar, the same hunger he'd seen in countless fighters' eyes over the years. "You like boxing, Shadow?" Ali asked. "Love it, champ. Watched all your fights. The rumble in the jungle? Man, when you took down Foreman, that was everything." For a moment, enthusiasm brightened Shadow's tired eyes. Ali nodded toward the gym. "Come inside, get warm, maybe throw a few real punches instead of those sorry excuses I just saw." The gym fell, silent when Ali walked in with Shadow. Trainers and boxers stared in disbelief as the greatest boxer in history led a homeless man to the locker room. 20 minutes later, Shadow emerged wearing borrowed gear, still ill-fitting but clean. "Champ, you can't be serious," whispered Ali's longtime friend and assistant trainer, Tony Richards. "This guy's a drunk or an addict. You're wasting your time." Ali watched as Shadow approached a heavy bag cautiously. "Maybe," Ali replied, "or maybe not. Everyone deserves one more round, Tony. You know that." That afternoon, Willie watched Shadow throw his first proper punches. They were unrefined but powerful, revealing a natural talent long buried under years of hardship. When Shadow finally collapsed on a bench, exhausted but smiling, Ali made a decision that would change both their lives. "Same time tomorrow," Ali said. It wasn't a question. Shadow looked up, confusion crossing his face. "Why?" Why would you help someone like me? Ali's response was simple yet profound. Because 20 years ago, that could have been me without the right people believing in me. Service to others is the rent you pay for your room here on earth. Consider this part of my rent. 3 months passed, and Shadow became a regular fixture at Ali's gym. The transformation had begun, though it wasn't without its struggles. There were days when Shadow wouldn't show up, lost to the bottle or his demons. On those days, Ali would search the streets of Louisville until he found him, sometimes in alleyways or under bridges, gently coaxing him back to the gym. "I can't do this, champ," Shadow said one particularly difficult day, his hands shaking from withdrawal. "I'm nobody. You're wasting your time." Ali, sitting beside him on a park bench, spoke with the same conviction that had made him a champion. "My trainer, Angelo Dundee, once told me something I never forgot. He said, 'You're better than you think you are.' I'm telling you the same thing now." Shadow looked skeptical. "You don't know what I've done, where I've been." "I don't need to know where you've been," Ali replied. "I only care about where you're going. If this story has already made you feel something, no matter how small, don't leave without giving back. Comment and subscribe now." The other trainers laughed behind Shadow's back. They called him Ali's charity case and bet on how long it would take before he gave up or stole something from the gym. But Ali remained steadfast, working with Shadow 5 days a week, teaching him not just how to box, but how to stand tall again. By summer, Shadow had been clean for 2 months. His body had transformed from gaunt to lean and muscular. The borrowed boxing gear had been replaced with his own equipment, purchased with money he earned doing maintenance work around the gym, a job Ali had arranged for him. One sweltering August afternoon, as Shadow hammered the speed bag with impressive precision, Tony approached Ali. "I've got to hand it to you, champ. I didn't think he'd last a week, but the man's got heart." Ali nodded, watching Shadow's focused form. "He reminds me of someone." "Who's that?" Tony asked. Ali smiled mysteriously. "Let's see if you figure it out." As autumn arrived, Ali arranged Shadow's first sparring match against one of the gym's promising amateurs. The entire gym gathered to watch what many expected would be a humiliating defeat for the former homeless man. Shadow entered the ring, nervous, his eyes seeking Ali for reassurance. Ali simply nodded, conveying his confidence without words. The bell rang, and Shadow's opponent came out aggressive, landing several quick jabs. Shadow absorbed the blows, backing up against the ropes as jeers rose from the crowd. "See, waste of time," someone shouted. Then something changed. Shadow's eyes narrowed, and he began to move differently, lighter on his feet, more calculating. When his opponent lunged forward with an overhand right, Shadow slipped the punch with an elegance that silenced the room, then countered with a perfect left hook that sent his opponent staggering. The gym erupted in surprised shouts. For the remaining 2 rounds, Shadow boxed with unexpected skill, ultimately winning the match by decision. As the final bell rang, Ali was the only person in the room who didn't look surprised. Later, as Shadow unwrapped his hands, Ali sat beside him. "You've boxed before," he said quietly, "and not just street fighting." Shadow stared at the floor for a long moment before answering. "Golden Gloves, 1972, made it to the regional finals in Chicago." He sighed deeply. "Then came Vietnam. Then came the nightmares. Then came the bottle to stop the nightmares." Ali placed a hand on Shadow's shoulder. "The past is the past. But now I understand what I saw in you that first day." "What's that, champ?" "A fighter who forgot he was a fighter." Winter had returned to Louisville. A full year had passed since Ali had first brought Shadow into the gym. The transformation was nothing short of remarkable. The man who once slept under bridges now rented a small apartment near the gym. The hollow-eyed addict was now a focused athlete and a respected junior trainer, helping neighborhood kids learn the basics of boxing. On a quiet December evening, as they sat in Ali's office reviewing training schedules, Shadow finally asked the question that had been on his mind for months. "Why did you really help me, champ?" "The truth." Ali leaned back in his chair, his movements slower now as his condition progressed, but his eyes still sharp and bright. "Do you remember a military hospital in Philadelphia, 1973? A ward for returning vets?" Shadow's brow furrowed, in confusion. "Yeah, I spent 6 months there after coming home. What about it?" "I visited that hospital during my suspension years, talked to the boys coming back from a war I refused to fight." Shadow's eyes widened as a distant memory surfaced. "I remember that day. You came through our ward, shook hands, told jokes, made everybody feel like champions for a day." Ali nodded slowly. "And there was this one soldier, still had bandages on his arm and leg. Skinny kid, but strong spirit. He told me something I never forgot." Shadow sat perfectly still, the color draining from his face. He said, "Champ, they took my body half to pieces, but I'm going to put it back together. And when I do, I'm going to be a boxer like you. Not for the glory, but to show others that you can come back from anything." Tears formed in Shadow's eyes. "You remembered me? From all those years ago?" "I didn't recognize you at first," Ali admitted, "but that day by the gym, when you quoted my words and took that fighting stance, something clicked. I thought maybe, just maybe, this was that same young man from the hospital. I wasn't sure, until that sparring match when I saw how you moved. Some things you can't unlearn, even after all those years." Shadow wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I didn't think anyone would remember a promise made by a broken kid in a hospital bed." Ali smiled. "I remember the promises people make to themselves. Those are the most important ones." For the next 4 years, Shadow not only continued his own training, but began working more formally with underprivileged youth in Louisville. With Ali's guidance, he established a program specifically for veterans struggling with addiction and homelessness, using boxing as a pathway to discipline and self-respect. What had begun as one man's act of compassion had evolved into something much larger. Shadow's story, initially met with skepticism and mockery, became an inspiration throughout the boxing community and beyond. Local news covered the program, and donations began flowing in, allowing them to expand to other cities. 5 years after their chance encounter, Ali and Shadow stood side by side at the opening of the James Shadow Wilson Veterans Boxing Center in downtown Louisville. Cameras flashed as Ali, his condition more pronounced, but his spirit undiminished, cut the ribbon with Shadow. After the ceremony, a young reporter approached Shadow. "Mr. Wilson, everyone knows how Muhammad Ali found you, homeless, and helped transform your life. But there's something I've been wondering. What's your connection to this building? Why was this location chosen for the center?" Shadow exchanged a glance with Ali, who nodded encouragingly. "This building," Shadow began, his voice thick with emotion, "was once the headquarters of Wilson Manufacturing, my father's company." The reporter looked confused. "Your father owned Wilson Manufacturing, the textile company?" Shadow nodded. "James Wilson Sr. built this company from nothing. I was his only son and heir. By 1970, we employed 300 people in Louisville. I was set to take over after college, but then came the draft. Vietnam changed everything for my father. When I came back, I wasn't the same man who left. The nightmares, the guilt. I turned to alcohol, then harder stuff. My father tried to help, but I pushed him away. By the time he died in 1980, I'd burned through my trust fund and was living on the streets. The company was sold, and this building sat empty for years." The reporter was scribbling frantically. "So when Muhammad Ali started training you, he had no idea who I really was," Shadow finished. "To him, I was just a man who needed a second chance. It wasn't until much later that he learned my full story." Ali, standing nearby, spoke up. When I found out who he really was, I asked him why he never mentioned it, why he let everyone think he was just another homeless veteran. Shadow looked at Ali with profound respect. Because that's exactly what I was. My name, my family's legacy, those things didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that the greatest fighter in history believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. Ali smiled. And now we've come full circle. Shadow bought back his father's building last year using the money from his boxing programs and speaking engagements. From the ashes, something new has risen. As the reporter left, visibly moved by the story, Shadow turned to Ali. You know, people always get it wrong. They think you saved me that day, and I suppose in many ways you did. But the truth is, you just reminded me that I was worth saving. Ali placed his trembling hand on Shadow's shoulder. That's all any of us can do for each other, remind each other of our worth when we forget. If you made it this far and felt every word, don't leave without subscribing, okay? I tell these stories with my heart on my sleeve to reach people like you, who feel, who get emotional, who truly live. If this touched you for real, give back. Comment, subscribe. Come, be part of this family with me until the next video.